Hey, how you doing? It's Clayton here, back with another video tutorial. And today what I'm going to be drawing is a new character concept that I've done for a real badass, get out of my way type attitude chick called Mahlika. Now she's actually I did her up for my new video intro for this channel, and I thought, why not take you through the process of how she came about and basically show you how the artwork was constructed from beginning to end. It's only going to be a short video, nothing too flash, but it should give you some insight into my thinking process and just the way that I like to construct an image and basically the process behind that. Now the workflow is pretty straightforward and pretty simple. In terms of, the steps that I take essentially to get to the end product. As you can see here, I'm starting out with a very simple sketch. I'm keeping it loose, relaxed, and you'll also notice that I'm working from a distance. There's not a lot of detail going on. I'm essentially placing in almost like anchor points for the different ideas that are almost running through my mind at this point in time, real time. And I'm kind of, I'm bouncing off different ideas. You can see I just tried to draw in an eye patch. I kind of put that in real quick just to see how it might work. It didn't work, so I took it out. But that's very much the place I'm at when I'm initially sketching in a drawing for a character concept. Laying down very loose lines to test different ideas that are buzzing around my mind out on paper and just to see how they look. And if they don't work out, no big deal, I just erase them. But with the sketch down and to a level that, I can work with, I essentially begin placing in the different values for the various elements that are currently making up the design. Elements such as her skin tone, her hair, and of course the outfit that I've created for her there. And the thing that I want to point out about this is by laying down these different tones, the darker tones and the lighter tones for the skin and the mid-tone for the hair there that you can see, I essentially get an idea for the silhouette of each of these different design elements. The cool thing about that is it creates somewhat of a visual effect, which I like to compare to looking up at the clouds, right? When you're looking up at the clouds and you're associating different images to the patterns within those clouds. That's essentially what is happening here for me as I'm laying down these different tones. I'm starting to get a little bit of a better idea as to the different silhouettes and that are being created within the artwork, within the design, and it essentially helps me to generate more ideas without necessarily having any preconceived ideas there. Again, it's almost like brainstorming in real time creativity. Because I'll be honest with you, I did not have a solid idea, a very ironed out idea at all when I first started out with this image. In fact, all I was taking to the canvas was the very vague idea that I wanted a female character who looked like a total badass, looked like she had walked off of the set of Sin City with a very strong gothic but Mad Max type appeal to her. And that's all I had to work with and basically sketched that down and filled out the rest. However, in terms of actually ironing out this design, in terms of putting the details down, which you can see are slowly becoming more and more refined as this video goes on, I'm essentially just tightening up that sketch. I'm laying in darker tones for the shadows, and at the moment we are at the base shadows, base highlight stage where I'm still working at a very simple level and thinking about the image in a very simple way. Thinking of the image and then the character is being made up of very simple forms. This does a few things. It allows me to basically work with the image without getting too overwhelmed by the details. Okay, so instead of seeing her face as being a face and shading it as such, I essentially start out shading it as if it was a sphere. I start shading the chest as if it was a barrel or another sphere type shape. The arms are cylinders, and of course the different elements that make up her outfit as also very geometrical primitive shapes. Now, of course, as the workflow continues, what I will begin doing is I will start to subdivide those shapes into more refined forms. So the head, or the sphere that I've symbolically used as the head, gets subdivided up into facial planes. And I go in there and I start to shade and articulate the more subtle forms of the face using that as a method of working. Now, it is very much the same case with the outfit and the hair, of course. You'll notice that everything starts out very broad and very all one tone, basically. It's only later on that I actually start to get into the nitty-gritty of the whole thing and really start to pull out the details and start to refine things and give them a little bit more character. In saying that, the other thing that I want to point out here, and this is super important because I think that it can often get overlooked, especially for new aspiring artists who are just kind of starting out and very focused on the proportions and the anatomy of a character and, you know, making sure they're all right, and of course color theory, rendering form, etc. That's all good and well. But concept design isn't just about that. It's also about representing an attitude, a personality for your character. Without the ability to do that, you're essentially left with a well-designed corpse. A character, if you can express their attitude and their personality, is going to connect with your audience so much more. It's going to really hook them in because they're going to be able to relate with that character. They're going to see aspects within themselves or within other people within that character. So it is very important to consider that when you are learning this stuff. It's always hard to take into account every single thing when you're first starting out. You know, you have to think about the anatomy and the composition, the perspective, the foreshortening, all that other stuff. And that can be very overwhelming with the brain, of course. It can kind of cause us to blow a fuse, essentially, if we think about all of those things too much at once. But, you know, as you begin to take care of the different aspects of your learning, you know, say that you do get your proportions down and you're pretty savvy with your anatomy, it's important not to forget that you also need to consider, again, those more not so easy to teach or learn aspects of human nature. Because again, this is how we relate with other people, it's how we relate with characters, and it is a big part in our overall understanding of the things that we're looking at. You know, visuals, they tell us a little bit about somebody first off, right off the bat, and we get a few clues as to what somebody is like. But really, it's when we begin talking to them and we begin to see their facial expressions in action and how they hold themselves that really causes us to either like a person or despise them, or to admire them, or to look down upon them, whatever it may be, whatever the intended effect is for your character. They should make your viewers feel a certain way. They shouldn't just look cool. In saying that, I did try to incorporate as much cool into this particular character, Mahlika here, as much as possible. And as you can probably already tell, I did want her to have a little bit of an attitude about her. Like, you know, if things were to go down, this chick would know how to handle the situation. And she probably wouldn't need any help doing so. She's definitely a leader, definitely somebody who thinks for herself and has a mind of her own, and basically does what she wants when she wants to do it. Her facial expression just says it all, I think, and probably her taste in fashion. There's a lot of spikes going on there and a lot of leather, which is, has badass killer written all over it. And again, that is the exact vibe I wanted to go for here, just because I thought it looked cool, and that's essentially why I love concept art, is I get to draw cool stuff. Now, of course, sometimes I get briefs that aren't so cool, where I'm drawing characters that aren't so great, or as enjoyable to draw as this this lady here, but you know, when you do have the time to sit down and kind of work your own creations out onto paper and get them out into the world, that's always fun. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about how this is coming along. Now, you'll notice that the outfit itself is relatively less defined and less articulated than the face. And the reason that I like to articulate the face to be first up, before anything else really, the reason I really like to finish it off as soon as possible is because I feel that one, it's one of the most important parts of a character. It's obviously automatically what the viewer is going to look at right off the bat. You know, that's the first form of communication. It's how we try to relate with people right up. We look at their facial expressions to gauge what they're thinking and how they are and who they are. But also I feel like if I can get that face sorted out, you know, which is personally for me the most important part of a character concept, then I don't have to worry about it anymore. And I can kind of work on the rest of the artwork, the rest of the design in peace, without, you know, that added stress of wondering whether or not the face is going to turn out. And in all honesty, I guess your audience is going to judge those types of things a little bit more harshly. They are going to judge, you know, especially the face and hands and general anatomy of a character a lot more harshly than their outfit, for example. Now, some outfits will get judged more harshly than others, depending on the type of style, theme, and genre that those characters are supposed to fit into. But for the most part, you can kind of go all out on your outfit or your costuming, depending on what the brief entails and what you need to incorporate, what you want to incorporate. And nobody can really say much about it. Like, this outfit that Mahlika is wearing is one of the most weirdest looking outfits. I've never seen it before in my life. I've just kind of come up with it using very much the same method I was talking about in the beginning of this video, which is, you know, just laying down those lines, laying down shapes and seeing what worked and what didn't work, and basically ironing it out from there, building up the highlights, defining the contours and the shadows. As you can see, the process is basically just me intensifying the highlights and intensifying the shadows as needed until I've got the right balance of tonage placed in there to essentially articulate those forms in the right, correct visual manner that they need to be articulated in for them to make sense. And by that I mean, you know, just making sure that all the different elements that make up this character design do fit in with, for example, the overall lighting conditions. Making sure that everything's consistent. You know, if everything's all the same tone, you know, if there's no difference within the tone, no hierarchy of light to dark across the figure overall and across the costume and the face, it's not going to make a lot of sense. And I think your viewers may not know exactly why something looks off, but they will be able to tell that something's off. And usually it's going to be a fundamental, less obvious problem such as that. But yeah, it's always important that in relation to the rest of the character, everything else is shaded accordingly. So, you know, for example, if I've got a lot of light intensity placed onto the face, that light intensity should have somewhat of a fall off across the rest of the character's body. And that fall off should be consistent across the outfit and across the different parts of the anatomy and the different textures and materials. And the hard part about that is that every material and every texture and every kind of element that goes into a character design may be shaded very differently from the other. For example, I'm not going to render her skin in the same way that I am rendering the dark black leather of her costume. All of these elements have completely different tones and completely different levels of specularity and shininess to them that essentially need to be considered for me to make this look accurate and believable. And it is something that obviously makes being a concept artist more interesting. It's partly why I'm still in the game. It's not straightforward 100% of the time. It always proves to be a challenge when you're working on this stuff. It's always difficult to get 100% right 100% of the time. And a lot of guesswork is involved. And you do have to use your best judgment. And that judgment is essentially developed through experience, through study, through repetition. And, I guess eventually at some point you begin to create an instinct and or develop an instinct for this kind of thing. And you tend to trust yourself a little bit more. You trust that what you think looks right is probably going to be right because you've done enough study and you've done enough of these, types of paintings as an example. So now we're getting to a stage where, the artwork is looking fairly polished, just defining some of the hair strands now and really making sure that the layering of that hair stands out in a visually appealing way. I'm not going into too much detail. I'm not defining every single strand, and even on the rest of the character concept, I'm not going into as much detail as I would, simply because of, for time reasons. I didn't want to put hours and hours into this piece as it was, and part of the reason for that was simply because the design for the intro didn't entail it. I did want more of a painterly, unfinished look, in all honesty. And, I think that I achieved that, and, the intro did come together quite well in the end. So, basically just placing in those last few touches and ironing out the details as much as possible, balancing out the contrasts, and making sure that everything's reading in just the way that I want it to read. You can see I've added in some rim lights there on the dark side of her face and arm, just to really make her pop off of the background, and now adding in the curves layer just to, finesse the contrast and make it really fit in with the kind of look that I wanted to go for with this piece. I hope you enjoyed the video and that you got a little bit more insight into the process here. And if you have any questions, make sure you leave them in the comment box below and I'll answer them for you. Until next time, I'll see you later.